Underwater is the latest sci-fi thriller slash horror to hit the big screen, but does it sink or does it swim? What's up everyone, welcome to Ashley Talks Movies. I'm back with another video. Today I'm going to be doing a review of Underwater. It's the new film starring Kristen, Stewart, Vincent, Cassel, John Gallagher Jr., Jessica Henwick, and T.J. Miller. The film is about a crew of researchers who have to flee to safety after what appears to be an earthquake destroys their underwater research facility. But something sinister could be lurking in the water. So I remember seeing the trailer for Underwater and thinking, wow, this looks a lot like Alien, except it's not in space, it's underwater. And I wasn't too impressed by the title either. I mean, Underwater, that seems pretty bland. So going into this movie, I didn't have really high expectations, and I didn't really know what to expect from it. So, is it good? Is it bad? Let's discuss. So the premise is not the strongest part of this film. It's pretty basic. And in fact, it tries too hard to be Alien in the ocean. Director William Eubank pulls a lot from Ridley Scott's film. In fact, Kristen Stewart plays a character named Nora who's essentially the film's Ripley. The film does have the intensity factor going for it. In fact, it doesn't waste any time getting straight into the action. And a lot of that works because of the use of the camera work, which builds that intensity. I mean, there's lots of close-up shots of the characters' faces as they're going through tight corridors and tunnels and doorways. There's even, the camera even takes you inside their suits at one point to give you a sense of what it's like to be in this really small space. And it really creates this very claustrophobic, tense atmosphere, which works really well for this film. Most of the intensity in this film, though, is cheapened by the use of these really jarring edits. I mean, there are moments in this film where it literally just cuts to black. And I couldn't figure out why. And I think maybe it was because the filmmaker didn't know where else to go in order to change from one scene to the next or from one time to the next time. So just decided to go to black to reset everything. Acting is really good here. As I mentioned before, Kristen Stewart's in this film, and she I think is probably the best thing about this film. And I'm not a huge fan of hers, but I might have to change my mind on her because the last couple of films I've seen her in, she's actually been pretty good, and here is no exception. She plays a character named Nora, and she's essentially the heart of the film and essentially the main character. And what she does with this character, again, she's basically this film's Ripley, if you've ever seen Alien. But she does something a little different with the character. She's not as bold or forceful as Ripley is. She's kind of jittery and nervous and unsure of herself. And I think that helps with that character, and I think she does a great job with it. The supporting cast of characters are fine here as well. As I mentioned before, T.J. Miller's in this film, and he's essentially there to be the comic relief. I don't think his character really works just because most of his jokes are unfunny, and his character is essentially reduced to one-liners. And at times, his one-liners don't really fit with the rest of the film because, it's building all this tension and it's nerve-wracking and intense, and then he throws out a one-liner that just kind of kills the mood. Some of his jokes are kind of funny, but largely it just doesn't work. Something else that does work in this film is how they use the monster in this movie. Because, a lot of monster movies, they're really big about showing you the monster. And I don't think that really works because usually the monster, when they show it to you, is not as scary as you would imagine it to be. And so when you don't show the monster that much, it allows the audience to kind of build the monster in their own minds, and it usually makes it scarier. And they do a pretty good job here with this film. I mean, they do show the monster, but it's usually in really quick glances, quick cuts to the monster. You never really kind of see the whole monster in full, or monsters in full, and you don't get a clear view of it. You kind of see it kind of approaching, and then it cuts to a reaction shot, or the scenes are really dark, and so you only kind of get a slight glance at it, and I think that's really effective. This film is kind of frustrating because you have pretty solid acting. The direction is really good. the film is shot beautifully. I mean, you can tell that money was spent on this film, and the production value is there. I mean, it looks really, really good, and even the set pieces are really great. And yet the story is the biggest problem with the film. As I mentioned before, you have all this other stuff that works really well, and the story is just kind of lackluster, to the point where even though some of it really works in this film, you get to the final act and it all kind of just falls apart. I mean, the third act of this film is probably the weakest. It is the weakest part of the film, and it almost undermines everything else that this film has been building up to. One last thing I'll mention, something that does work really well in this film, is the sound design. So you have these really good shots that create this like intense claustrophobic atmosphere, right? There's close-ups, tight shots of the characters. You're inside their helmets and their suits. You're in these dark corners and crevices and hallways. Everything's tight, and you don't know where you can't see anything. And all that is made better by the sound effects, because the sound design here with this film is so great. The use of sound effects and in the atmosphere really helps create that tension. There are moments where you hear Kristen Stewart's character breathing in her suit, and then it'll go silent because something is looming. The facility creaks as it's like falling apart, and because it's in the water, and just it all works so well. And again, it's so frustrating because the story just doesn't hold up. This movie tries so hard to be like Alien and like some other like disaster monster sci-fi movies that it kind of gets lost in itself, where it doesn't quite know what it wants to be. It starts off pretty strong, but as it gets going, it just gets sort of muddled and confused in its own self. And again, it's a shame because almost everything else in this movie works pretty well. The acting, the sound design, the camera work, the score, just the set pieces, everything else works pretty well. But the story doesn't hold up. And so you're just kind of left with this movie that doesn't really connect. I didn't really feel any emotion really for any of these characters, and they're in danger most of this movie, and I was just kind of watching them go through the motions, which is a shame because I said before, this movie could have been so good because the concept was there and everything else, all the pieces were there, and the story just doesn't work. It just doesn't. So those are my thoughts on Underwater. If you've seen the film, let me know what you think in the comment section below. While you're here, please like and share this review, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button.